Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome Andrea Sonnenberg. She's an attorney and she's the author of the book, Panda's Helping Paw. Today's Kevin MD article is titled, The Power of Bibliotherapy to Heal. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So let's start by briefly sharing your story and journey to where you are today.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm a lawyer and I founded a literacy and enrichment program for underserved students. So, working for many years in underserved communities, bringing literacy and improving literacy for these kids. And I really was able to see firsthand how literacy transformed these kids and their lives and was able to give them better opportunities. Sadly, almost 6 years ago, on the 13th, it'll be actually 6 years, I lost a son a 21-year-old son who had struggled with mental health issues from childhood. And as you can imagine, it was quite devastating and really changed my life. And my life, I shattered into a million little pieces and I had to put myself back together like Humpty Dumpty. But I didn't put myself back together the same way. You're never the same after losing a child. And I realized that what I needed to go forward was to try to do something to heal the world in memory of my son, to elevate his legacy. And so, with my background in law and my background in literacy, and realizing the power and transformation that it can occur through literacy, I realized that I wanted to write a children's book about mental health because that was the subject that was on my mind, and be able to share the message of awareness, education, stigma reduction, empathy, all those kind of things, to be able to share that with the world. And part of it was because there was no such book that existed when my son was young. And I realized it would have been nice to be able to have that, to share with the family, to share with caregivers, to share with schools, and to be able to really connect with a community as well around this shared experience. So that was really that's really sort of my story and what brought me to writing Panda's Helping Paw.
So you mentioned that during childhood, mental health issues aren't typically discussed, and that's one of the reasons, of course, why you wrote the book. Talk about some of the stigma that's involved with that.
I like to say that it's changing. It's definitely changing and it's definitely getting better. And young people are much more open about accepting therapy and medication and talking about it. Um, but there still is a stigma. And when my son was young, I was very private about the fact that he was struggling. And I was concerned that people would look down on him or they would hold it against him, and it would prevent him from getting into schools that he wanted to get into. And something that I realized back then and something that I really espouse now is we need to equate mental and physical illness. They're the same. They just happen to impact different parts of the body. And what I would always say was that when there was a physical illness, everybody brought cakes and casseroles. And when there was a mental illness, there were whispers and silence. And people would talk behind my back, and people tried to get us kicked out of school. I tried to get my son kicked out of school. Even a friend who was a physician, even a very good friend, instead of coming to us and saying, what is the problem and can I help? And went to the school and said, this child shouldn't be in this school. This is, he's impacting other children. So, yes, there was definitely stigma. And it is really important that we learn to equate the two types of illness. And I think, again, like I said, we're coming a long way, and we've
Mhm.
come a long way. But that's part of the reason that I wrote the book as well, because it talks about Bunny, the main character, and he's hurting on the inside as opposed to hurting on the outside. And the beginning of the book, Elephant gets hurt on the outside. His trunk gets hurt. He has a Band-Aid. Everybody sees it. And we're all, oh, and everybody's bringing cakes and casseroles. So it really was my story. Everybody's bringing the cakes and casseroles. And when Bunny's hurt on the inside, no one's doing anything.
Mhm.
And so that's really kind of what I experienced. And it was my story. And I love to share this lovely story about a friend. When I explained this to a friend years later, she brought me this beautiful crystal rose and said, "This is my casserole. Like, I am bringing this to you as my casserole, as my loving thought and care and concern about what you're going through."
Your Kevin MD article is titled The Power of Bibliotherapy to Heal. So tell us about this article.
So, as I mentioned, I realized because of my immersion in the world of literacy, I realized how impactful it can be. And so I started doing research and I said, is this a phenomenon that like I've just experienced, or is this, is this a thing? And it's a thing. It's in the ancient days, the ancient Greeks, on the sign on their library said, healing for the soul. So it's always been, it's always for years, and back in ancient history was a place of healing.
Mhm.
And so the thing that's so wonderful about bibliotherapy is that it's something that is very low tech. I'm very, something that I really am espousing in my advocacy journey is the need for low tech solutions.
Yeah.
We are short on mental health professionals, and we have a huge crisis, particularly with children. So we've got to figure out ways to access people, for people to have access, low cost, low tech, easily available. Bibliotherapy is something that parents can do in their home with their children, that they don't need a mental health professional. They don't need any, high tech solution. They can read a book with their child and they can discuss issues. And then there's a ripple effect beyond just the parent, because then the parent learns about it. The parent can share it with a friend. The parent can share it with a caregiver. The parent can share it with a teacher. So I think it's really important because it's such a simple solution. And also, a parent cares so much about their child, they are really going to take it seriously and try really hard. And they're with their child every day. So it's something, if a child is in therapy, it's once a week, a few times a month with a parent, parents with a child every day. So it's something that can really be reinforced. And it just offers incredible therapeutic potential in the mental health landscape in a very low tech and easily accessible solution. Libraries are available. We can
Mhm.
make libraries into wellness centers.
Yeah.
That's sort of like, my long-term vision. And, by exposing children to diverse characters and scenarios, they learn to understand differences. They learn to understand what they're going through, and it enhances their emotional intelligence and their social skills. It also leads to early intervention. You raise awareness, you teach parents, they sort of can say, "Oh, maybe this is something that's going on with my child, and I need to take the child to a specialist and see if there's a diagnosis." So it helps kids, it helps to teach your, even if your own child is not suffering, it helps with empathy.
Hmm.
If your child is suffering, it helps with understanding. And it's just important for us all to be aware. Just like we want to understand if a child is suffering with a physical ailment, we want to understand if a child, and be sympathetic if a child is understanding, is impacted by a mental ailment as well.
So tell us a story or a case study that really showcases that impact bibliotherapy can have.
So I do a lot of readings in schools, and I bring puppets that look like the characters of the animals. It's interesting. I decided to write about animals instead
Mhm.
of people. Kids can kind of relate to the animals, and it makes them like kind of more open and don't feel as judged. And so I go to schools and I have discussion questions in the back of the book. I also have a free curriculum that's on my website that you can download and utilize the curriculum with the book. And when I go to schools, I watch kids' eyes light up.
Mm.
I watch them feel comfortable. I watch them feel connected and really open up to me, a stranger, open up to me. So imagine how they would open up to someone that's a loved one, or someone that is close to them, about something that they're struggling with, or about a way they can help someone else who's struggling, or about a way that they can try to be better. and this is really kind of the most important thing and something that I really learned through my journey, they're not alone. They're not alone. And like a lot of other people are going through what they're going through.
What are some ways healthcare professionals can incorporate bibliotherapy as part of a treatment regimen?
They can have a list of books that are on related topics, and they can share these books with their patients. They can recommend that parents read. We all recommend, we know that reading increases cognitive ability, that we know that,
Hmm.
but now we know it reduces stress. Research backs this up. It reduces stress, it reduces depression, it creates connectivity, all these kind of things. So these professionals can recommend books to their children, not just read to your kids, but read books that are on these topics. And there are books on these topics now. And engage in discussion with your children about these books. Join book groups. Encourage your families to encourage their teachers to incorporate these kind of books into school. Let's discuss these things and raise awareness so that it just becomes as commonplace as talking about a cold or a broken bone or diabetes, or any of these kind of ailments that children experience. It's just as common, and it's just as comfortable to talk about it, and it's just as understanded and accepted as those other kind of ailments.
Now, for those parents who may be listening to you here, where can they find lists of these books, and what are some examples of topics of books that would lend itself to bibliotherapy?
They can find you can Google books on mental health. You will find it on the internet quite easily. There are books on depression, there are books on anxiety, there are books on fears, there are books on, even on personality disorders,
Hmm.
it age appropriate. So depending on the level, like my book, Panda's Helping Paw, is really about depression. Because it's meant for kids pre-K to about third grade, I don't use the word depression. I use hurting on the inside is the concept. And then as kids get older, there's no shame in the word depression at all. I just think it might be hard for them to
Hmm.
understand. So as the kids age, then we start using more descriptive language. I actually wrote a second book since that article, and it's called Elephant's Big Climb, and it's about anxiety. Elephant has to climb the rope in gym class and is very anxious about climbing the rope. And I actually do use the word anxiety in that book because I think it's pretty understandable and relatable. And we talk about calming
Hmm.
techniques, and we talk about yoga, and one of the characters' moms happens to be a yoga instructor. So again, trying to incorporate like how accepted this is, and how and to normalize the topic. So the books are everywhere. You can always look. My website is gettingthroughtogether.com, and we list books, and like I mentioned, we have curriculum available on my website as well. So go out and check it out, and bring these books to your kids.
You mentioned that you're looking for low tech approaches, obviously, specifically with books. I have two teenage daughters, and as you could imagine, they're always on their devices and phones. So, how can you get kids to break away from all of these high tech influences and go for a more low tech solution like paper books?
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. Like even as a grown up, like, do I watch Netflix or do I read a book?
Yeah.
I mean, we got to, we got to be honest. I think the way to do it is quality and fantastic content. And I also think book clubs are incredible. If you can
Hmm.
encourage kids to join book clubs, because connectivity is what's so important. The most important thing that I learned since losing my son, and through this journey, has been how important community is, and how important it is to share your story, and how important it is to find others that are going through similar experiences that you are. I actually I formed a support group, a grief
Hmm.
support group, when I lost my son, and it was life changing for me. So, to the extent that young people can read books that their peers are reading and they can share about it, I think it could be incredibly powerful. I also think that I mean, there are positives about social media. We all know all the negatives, but there are positives in terms of connectivity.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible app now that's out called Teen Talk, and it's what it does is it connects teens with other teens where the teen is the sort of therapist, but they're not a therapist obviously, and they're
Yeah.
trained by a therapist and they're supervised by a therapist, but it enables teens to talk to teens in a manner that they can relate to, because they text, they don't
Yeah.
talk, they
Yeah.
text. So I think things like that, I kind of incorporate that as a low tech solution. There are ways for our kids to be able to, beyond just typical therapy and medications, to be able to share with other teens, to share what they're going through, realize they're not alone, get advice, and relate in a way that they can't relate to adults or people that are older than them. So that's what I would recommend.
We're talking to Andrea Sonnenberg. She's an attorney and she's the author of Pandas Helping Paw. Today's Kevin MD article is titled The Power of Bibliotherapy to Heal. Andrea, let's end with some of your take home messages that you like to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
I guess I would like to say that how important it is to realize that we're a community and that we have to be supportive of each other, and we have to understand that everybody's on a journey. And if we can connect with each other through whatever means necessary, but in this case, I'm saying let's connect through storytelling. We will be able to understand each other, and we will be able to raise awareness. We will be able to push for solutions. And so I think, like as a very low tech, basic way to start on this path is to read books with our kids about a topic that's can be a little taboo, but let's read about it, let's share about it, let's discuss it so that we can make it less taboo, and we can head on that path towards helping more people heal.
Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.